Hi everyone, Mature Simmer here. So I am back here on generational farming, and it is time to mow again. So for the second time this year, again trying to stay on track, just to make sure that I can continue to maximize my throughput. So just trying to get myself set up here. Gonna get, let's see, get everything unfolded, but we're gonna head over past that little shed as always as the corn vanishes and my grass appears. If you've been watching this generation for a while, you're well aware of how this all works out. Alright, so we are ready to harvest, just making sure. Alright, so I am going to start that up, and away we go. So, I'm gonna try to run a little closer here. Always leaving a little bit, I get. Oh, that tree always, like, comes out and gets me, because it's so substantially, in theory, in my head, it's out of line. I mean, I'm sure it's following the path of the property line better than I am in my mental map. But I tend to clip that one all the time. So for those, just to get everybody up to speed, because there's always potentially new viewers and so forth, generational farming is something that we're doing here on FSN, which is the Farm Simulator Network, a series of multiplayer servers. And it's a competition that started in late 2022. So, you know, just gives you an idea of where we're at. I know what I'm trying to do, and oh boy, I didn't mean to go in there, but it did, and then it incorrectly, because it shouldn't really let me cut because that's not my land, but obviously it does stuff like that sometimes. So we'll get this in here, and I want to set my line, so that's always the first thing to do. Now we've got that, can turn that on, and then what's more important on the other side, once I get going. Alright, we'll lower this down, and now I just need to run up the edge. So, as I was saying, it's a competition here in FSN. The simple goal of the competition is to make the most money at the end of the competition. It can last from 7 to 10 generations. As you saw in the thumbnail, we're in generation 2. We're in year 9, right in the summer here, so we're kind of getting close to the halfway point of year 9. In theory, we're not supposed to be in any generation for more than 10 years. It's 2 to 10 years. Again, all these things are dealt with random number generators and so forth that tell the leadership, hey, this is what we're doing, and we're supposed to get a year's worth of notice before we're leaving the server. So I would expect we're going to hear something in the next few days, but we haven't yet, so I don't know for certain. There was a revamp going on in FSN, which wasn't specific to generational farming. It was kind of a broader thing about the whole ecosystem, and there was a lot of attention in the last month or two to that, and so I just don't know if that's kind of thrown things off kilter or not. So revamp in theory is done, other than just tidying things up. So I was hoping that we might have heard something in the last week or so, but hasn't happened yet. So I'm just continuing to move along, and you know, really, I mean, the thing we need to do is just operate as if we're here, because until we're not here, we're here, if that makes sense. So that is what I am doing. And so I have made the decision that the best way I can be competitive is to just cut grass and turn it into silage and sell that, and that is the most effective way to make money in the scenario we've got. There's constraints involved. I haven't covered those in several episodes, so I suppose we'll go into that here, just so everybody's got a full picture. Usually 21 rows is about where I go over. You can see a couple times I've gone a little further. I think last time I did cut into the next one, but it just depends on where things get snapped and so forth. So, and until that corn disappears, obviously we've got a little bit more burden on the server and lag and so forth. But should be getting close where my whole field is drawn. I would imagine the next redraw there, that little bundle will disappear and we'll be all set. I'm just staring at it, but no, we're not going to know. But I'm thinking by the time I come back through, it'll be gone. We're not allowed to move equipment except for 3 pieces. So I moved my windrower, which is a rake that goes on the front, my tractor, and I think my fertilizer spreader. I think those were my 3 pieces. It's been a while, you know, given that we're on just the regular year. You know, 1 year, 10 years on here would be 120 days, so it's 3 to 4 months of real time. So again, we're mid-year 9, and we did have a little bit of a hiccup with revamp where we weren't able to get on for pretty much a game year. So technically this would be mid-year, mid-10, you know, year 10. So I'm basically like 4 months out from when I had to move my equipment. So I apologize for not having that fresh in my mind with exactly what I did. You know, and then I just purchased these mowers again, and you know, the forage wagon that I'm using and so forth. So I have a very small footprint, intentionally, that I'm working with here to operate this. And that's one of the ways that this becomes the most profitable thing we can do, and kind of why I figured out what I did and I'm doing what I did. Because with crops, with not being able to keep equipment, the amount of equipment you need for crops, because if you think about it, you need to replant crop every year, you have to have a large harvester, you're usually going to have a truck and trailers to dump things in, you're probably going to be dealing with weeds, so you're probably going to have a sprayer. There's just a lot more investment that goes into crops. But the challenge here, the way this challenge is structured, is that word investment can't really be used, because since I can't hold on to equipment, it's not, oh gee, I bought myself a $300,000 harvester, I just keep it in decent shape and I'm good to go from thenceforward, and I can generate money off of that, because that would chew up one of my 3 slots, and given that you need probably 10 or 12 pieces of equipment to really run crops versus 5 or 6 to run grass, you know, that all works together to get to the point and make the decision that I did. My only validation with data and real results is that at the end of Generation 1, I was in 2nd place. So that seems to certainly give value. What is going on other than the lag? I mean, I have not been on the gas, so it's just a little bit frustrating. Come on. I don't know what is happening, but sometimes this is what occurs with multiplayer servers. But in any event, that gets you to where we're at. So we're waiting. I'm waiting for what Generation 3 will be, assuming everything's continuing as normal, but we should be moving soon. When we move, there's usually a several day lapse until we're able to, get pulled off and then put on. I think some of that is, I think they've just been using the same server and they're just putting the map on and so forth. So obviously they need to get us all off, and then they need to get the map on the server and get everything set up and go from there. So what I'm trying to do, I had gotten off kilter a couple times a couple years ago, in that I lost track of time because these servers are not in the same time scale as the regular FSN farm that I have that I'm operating. So there's a bit of a stagger. They're trying to fix that in the revamp with having a calendar on the web page for FSN to help us keep that tracked. But because I'm keeping track of two different things, a couple of years ago I miscalculated and suddenly came in and it was, I don't know, October, November, maybe even December, and I hadn't done my last mow of the year. I went and did that, but that threw all my timing off. And then the last couple years, because of that, I haven't been able to get the 3 cycles that I try to do every year complete. So it's been a little bit off. I don't know what that's going to look like. And we really, so far, have only gotten kind of information at the end of each generation. So, I was told I was second. It's just simply a list of order. It doesn't show what our net worth is, so I have no idea how I compare to the first and third. I have some feelings just based on what I've seen and my own scouting and so forth, but there's no data that lets me validate it. So, I can only operate on the standpoint as I was working through it and seeing what other people were doing. Was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this guy's going to beat me. He did. And then because I ended up kind of where I thought I'd end up, it makes me feel like, okay, I understand how the finances are working and so forth. So I have a pretty good idea. I think the third place person is significantly closer to me than I am to the first place person. So basically we're all fighting for everything other than first at this point. But the other piece that I had mentioned in the last episode that I was on here is I'm not sure how active people are now. I don't know if the revamp threw things off for folks or whatever, but it would not be uncommon for me to see folks on the server sometime when I'm working, but I haven't in the last game year for sure. And I'm also not seeing when I log in in the multiplayer window that Farming Simulator gives you. You can see other servers that have similar names. So I would see the other 2 generational farming servers that are operating, and those tend to have 0 of 8 every time I come in too, which is also abnormal for what I had been seeing previously, especially in the first generation. So I think just over time there's some attrition where I think folks are just losing interest. I know for certain there's some farmers up north of me here that own some fields where equipment has been sitting for years and years. This field next to me is owned by someone that is not, and when I say next to me, it's behind me now. You can see it's not planted. It's July. It wouldn't be at a point where it would be harvested. That has also been probably 3-4 years since anyone has done anything with that field. So it basically got harvested, and then I think it's been ignored, and I don't know that the FM's been on again to do any substantial work or not. So there's several blues in FSN multiplayer, or in, I think, Farming Simulator multiplayer, and it's hard to tell them apart on the map. So I think the person who owns the field next to me over to the left there now might be the same one that's got the equipment sitting on some fields up north of me that they own that also are sitting in a unused state as well. So all that just goes to say this may turn out to be something that we finish and do well simply because we stick with it and we do we just stay active. I think other folks are starting to lose interest is what might be going on. And if you think about it, we went 8 years in the first generation. We're in the 9th active year, technically 10th year since we were put on to this one. And, given just the timing, we're 6 months, 7 months in since we started, and we're only on the 2nd generation. And it wasn't as if leadership didn't make it clear, like, this is likely going to be a multi-year competition. So I think it was shared with all of us. It's always the question in those situations, like, did people really read it? Did they understand it? Or were they just like, oh yeah, I love, I'm going to be playing anyway, I'm going to be doing this. And I've certainly had my moments where I'm just kind of a little overwhelmed by the tedium of grass. But I also understand what I signed up for, and I knew that, and so I power through those moments where I have a little bit of weakness, like, oh, I'm really not enjoying this. There's a desire to quit, but that's just not my nature normally. So now on the other side of that, there is always a fear that we put this effort in and the whole program gets terminated early by FSN leadership because everybody else drops out maybe, and they just determine, okay, people aren't interested, we're not going to keep doing what's necessary to maintain this, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, if it comes. I'm hoping it doesn't, because the one thing I definitely enjoy about this is the ability to get onto maps that I've not played regularly. I mean, I've certainly tried certain maps for maybe a few hours here and there. Our first generation was on Oberon. I think we all probably played with that in FS22 for a bit, because it was a good one to go through and kind of learn FS22 functionality. It was obviously one of the original maps the game was released with. For me, it was more interesting than Elm Creek, which was probably the only other really playable original map that came with the game. The Alpine one, Erlengrot, I think is what it is. You needed to like Alpine farming, and it didn't have as many arable fields and so forth, so I think most folks spent time either on Elm Creek or Oberon. And so I had done that, but then very quickly moved to other maps once modders started coming out with things, and kind of never looked back, which I think is probably normal. But it was fun getting to actually play for months on Oberon and trying to understand it and see what made sense, especially since in this iteration within FSN we are able to do contracts if we want. So that gave me the ability to work around different areas of the map, kind of determine, yeah, I really would have hated to have a farm here. Oh, this would have been a good alternative too, and so forth. I never felt any misgivings or anything like, wow, if I had it to do over again, I would have reset here. In general, with my personality, I tend to not think that way anyway, because to me, I know that just goes down a sadness spiral that, what's the point? I can't go back and change history, and so regretting my decision is just a lot of wasted energy. So I tend to like to go forward from where I am, as opposed to lament where I could have been. So, but it's still nice to just appreciate the maps and so forth. And there's a possibility I come across one that even after 3 or 4 months, when we move on, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to revisit that in single player or something because I really enjoyed it. I can't say that is what's happened with either of these maps. I've had my fill of both at this point now that we've been here for several months. And normally in FSN, I'm not a map hopper. Some people that's what they enjoy about the multiplayer experience is they can spend a little bit of time in one area, then flip over, go to another area. But to me, it's the scenery changes, but everything else is the same. You're doing the same mechanics, so you might as well just stay like you normally would within a real farm. It's not like farmers pick up and move every 2 years to just get new scenery. Family farms exist for generations and so forth, and that is what makes sense. So, but yeah, I'd certainly love this to continue, but I'm being upfront in that I'm a little concerned given the lack of activity. There's just not a lot of chatter on Discord, where initially all of the generational farming servers had a good amount of chatter going on. I'm just thinking people are trickling away, so I'll be curious how everything continues on. But at this point, that's all I've got to share with you today. Just will continue to finish this up. I've got a little bit more open runway to do what I need to today with this, so I will probably get everything done that I need to here before I go and do something else somewhere else. So that is what I will be doing. This series tends to be pretty much real time in posting. I kind of do the work, and then as quickly as I can get the video together and post it on YouTube, I do that, which is not what any of my other series are doing. But because there's so much going on, and the nature of this being a competition, what I don't want is things maybe posting 2 or 3 weeks later, and like I could be moving on to the next server or something, and you've still got 7 or 8 episodes that happen in my normal FSN series, and that's okay on those because it's just a different environment. But for this, I want to keep it real time, so you should see this sometime today, same day I'm working, and then I'll be back when there is another installment to give you. So I will see you next time.